Some of the papers this morning leads with an EndSARS story. The Nigerian Tribune, EndSARS, ECOWAS court finds FG guilty of rights violations. Stories on page 12. And at the bottom of the page, you see LG Autonomy Supreme Court delivers judgment today. If you also check the front page of the Daily Independent newspaper, EndSARS protest, ECOWAS court slams FG, finds it guilty of rights violations. Details on the inside pages of the paper this morning. The front page of the Daily Times newspaper has the same story, EndSARS protest. ECOWAS court finds FG guilty of rights violations. No violation of right to life, court rules. Awards fine of 2 million naira each against FG in favor of the applicants. The rest of the story you'll find on page 2 of the paper this morning. Up next is food-related stories. Vanguard newspaper leads with, will regulate price of imported foodstuff. FG stories on page 5. And if you look at the right, it says food prices to crash in 180 days. We can't see president to advise him on food crisis, according to Ndume. Lament, even ministers cannot see him. Notes Nigerians like Sudanese dying of hunger. Insists children in Northwest malnourished. Front page of Business Day has farmer security cost piles pressure on food prices. Details of that story you find on the front page. It continues on the inside pages of the paper this morning. Look at the front page of This Nigerian newspaper. Conflicting judgments. No going back on sanction for erring judges, says CGN. Stories on page 4. At the bottom of the page, EndSARS. Guilty as charged. ECOWAS court indicts Nigeria over human rights violation. Front page of the Daily Trust newspaper has bread beyond reach. Citizens lament. Bakeries shut down due to rising cost of production. Nigerians seek relatively cheaper foods. Government must act now. Master bakers. The details of that story you find on page 4 of Daily Trust newspaper this morning. The Nigerian News Direct has this one on its front page. Lagos-Abeokuta Expressway, while we awarded project without fake approval, according to Dapo Abiodun. Laments bureaucratic bottlenecks, alleges coordinated media attacks. That story is on page 3 of the paper this morning. The front page of Leadership newspaper, fresh tension in reps. 150 first-time members move against House leadership. Stories on page 4. Protest marginalization, exclusion, seek rejig of committees. It's a normal parliamentary process, according to House spokesman. The Guardian newspaper this morning says, abuse, violation of urban planning laws breed homelessness, slums. That story is on page 6. You see some infographics on the front page. At an urban growth rate of 4.3% yearly, Kano, Ibadan, Lagos, Port Harcourt, Abuja, Kaduna, Onitsha, and Benin City, among others, are projected to become bigger till 2030. And a few other infographics on the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning. These are some of the papers we have for you today.
Well, those are the papers that we have this morning. Quite a lot of things going on as well. There's lots of infrastructure talk. But of course, everyone has been buzzing about this EndSARS story since yesterday. The ECOWAS court finding the federal government guilty. We're seeing that from the Guardian newspaper this morning. More on that from page 4. And it's a very interesting dynamic. One that, it's kudos to the people who held on and stood through this entire process. If you want to get all the details of what the ECOWAS court has said, you can go to page 4 of the Guardian newspaper. But what does this mean? What happens afterwards? EndSARS was pivotal in our nation's history, and one that really at least opened the eyes of the elite to the fact that, look, we have a generation of young people who do not feel governed, who do not feel wanted, who do not feel loved by their country, and haven't exactly experienced good governance. That was one of the major fallouts of the EndSARS. But have there been lessons learned from there? Are we seeing a government that is more accountable to young people? But that's a whole conversation for another time. If you want to get more on that, you can actually go to the Guardian newspaper, get more on that from page 4. But also on the Guardian newspaper this morning, abuse, violation of urban planning laws breed homelessness and slums. We're seeing that on page 6 also of the Guardian newspaper. And at an urban growth rate of over 4.3% yearly, Kano, Ibadan, Lagos, Port Harcourt, Abuja, Kaduna, Onitsha, and Benin City, among others, are projected to become bigger till 2030. This is a given. But what's being done to ensure that this increase in population is catered for? A lot of infrastructure has to go into catering for this expansion that we're seeing in these cities. And with the youth population that is growing so much, a lot needs to be done. So governors, especially governors at the state level, have the onus on them to prepare for this. Don't just do your term and think I'm just going to do my 4 years or 8 years and just leave the place. You have to prepare for the future. Leave legacy projects, things that will be able to help the future generation. If you're not doing that, I don't know what you're doing, and you probably shouldn't be sitting on that chair. Ayo, what do you think? And what's standing out for you in the papers this morning?
I cannot but queue with you on that issue, on the issues that you have raised this morning, because at the end of the day, it's all about the people. All about the people. But you know what stands out for me this morning is on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper and the Vanguard newspaper. Two newspapers drawing attention to two very important staples in the lives of Nigerians. Look at the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper, for instance. Bread beyond reach. Citizens lament. That's what you have on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper. We also hear that bakeries are shutting down due to high cost of production. I think as far back as some 5, 10 or so years ago, maybe almost or about 10 years ago, I knew a baker who said, look, as far back as that time, he'd been substituting some imported production materials for locally sourced ones. And for him, it was working. It helped him to innovate, so to speak. But now that we are reading this, and a good number of people would remember how they grew up, how important bread was, especially now that you literally have to eat healthy. And now, I mean, the reason why some people are restricting themselves to certain kinds of bread, certain bread diets, or some are even doing away with bread altogether, is because they are not sure how it will affect their bodies. And there are those who are saying, look, we can eat bread, but we have to remove certain things from them. And those conversations are still there. But now that we hear this, that the cost of production is increasing and the people are shouting, most certainly something. And guess what? The last of the riders is by master bakers saying that the government must do something as soon as possible. In fact, they said government must act now. And I want to hope that government is listening. Related to that is on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. And it is saying that the federal government is promising to regulate the price of imported foodstuff. And that's, I don't know if we want to say that is cheering, but there are fears. The fears are still there that if imported food come into the country, local manufacturers may be getting the wrong end of the stick. How that will go, I guess, we just have to hold the federal government to its promise. But look at one of the riders, food prices to crash in 180 days. There are those who would say we heard that before, because as far back as the Second Republic, the second term of the Second Republic, we heard that even the first term, the government of the day had begun to talk about austerity measures. Today, what are we going to call what we have on our hands now? Now, if people cannot live, cannot feed well, food is the #1 need of any human being. Back in 2022, or was it I think it was 2022, we were talking about multidimensional poverty of up to 130 million Nigerians, 133 million Nigerians, and here we're talking about the scarcity of foodstuff. It's definitely something that is very, very concerning.